Welcome to Lola and the Poets, a podcast on the magical reel. Hello, and welcome to the 12th episode of Lola and the Poets podcast. And our lovely guest is Caroline Chapple. She's from London. She is an artist. She's an illustrator, a scribe, a visual thinker, a marketing expert, ex-businesswoman, and also has a background in coaching. She trained as a coach. So hello, Caroline.
Hi, Milena. How lovely to speak to you.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people are going to listen to him over the radio. And unless he says something that's sensational, it's just no good.
It's really an interesting day because it's a Sunday. So, yes. And it's a Mercury retrograde. We have to put that in there because,
yes.
If anything comes up untoward, you can just always say, well, it was that kind of celestial time. I have to apologize to everyone beforehand because there might be some noises because my usually very quiet road on Sundays is now really busy. So I don't really know why, but it's just people decided they want to go out and they want to drive around my house. So first, tell me a bit, how's the weather generally? And both, personal and collective, where you're at, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. I'm good, actually. If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said that I was banging my head against the wall. But I've had a really interesting week and a really kind of opening and creative week, which has been just what I needed and what I've been looking for in the last few weeks. So I did a workshop this week, which was really just what I needed. And in terms of physically where I am, it's a beautiful spring day here and I'm looking out at rustling leaves on the trees. So it's that as well certainly picks your spirit up. So
it really does. Yeah.
Yes.
It's very thankfully we're doing it on a jolly day. So very recently I saw on your Instagram account, which will be in the show notes, like all your bits and your contacts. And which I really encourage everybody to follow because it's extraordinary, lovely, and very uplifting.
Thank you.
Work that you do. Really, it just always brings a smile to my face. Especially your little, doodles and little cartoons in between the professional stuff that you do. It's just it hits the mark always. I saw recently that you did illustrations for a book.
Yes.
And it's a book on coaching. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. It is. It's really good. I can recommend it highly. Called Coach Yourself Confident. And I worked with Julie on it. It was a wonderful collaboration. She's a great writer and a great coach.
The thing that you do also actually probably takes most of your time is graphic recording. I didn't know really what graphic recording was. That doesn't mean that most people listening to this podcast don't know, but let's say that some people don't. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what that is?
Yes, absolutely. So graphic recording is essentially all the work I do and really have done beforehand is about it is about storytelling, and it's about trying to find the essential messages of what people are saying and bring those to the surface. And I used to do that with writing, and I now do it with visuals. So graphic recording is when you go to some form of live event. That can be anything from a huge conference to a meeting between two people. And our job is to listen to what's being said and to essentially try and pull out the key points and put them in a visual form. And what that looks like typically will be a very large piece of paper, or you can do it digitally, but a very large piece of paper. So I generally work on a space about 3 meters wide by about 1 meter high. And essentially you're creating a visual mural which shows what's been talked about, what's important to the people who've been in the room. And so it's a mixture between witnessing and pulling out key points. And the intention of that is that people can connect with the information really in a more easy and more digestible way, and hopefully in a way that stays with them for longer.
Because it also is, it's actually very entertaining.
Yes.
It's a world that you create on that piece of paper. At least that's how I see it. It's like a planet peopled. I went through I follow you, so every so often I see what you do. But now that I was preparing for this show, I had a more thorough look. And then I realized that you do work for the police, yes, and for GPs, and yes, for universities like Middlesex, and yes, the places that I wouldn't generally think that you would go and that would actually ask for such help, but makes sense that they do. So how's your experience working with the government?
It's well, it varies. It's always down to the people, isn't it? So you might get, because when I started out, because I had a corporate background, I was keen to work with corporates, and a lot of my colleagues and friends work with more social systems. And I think there was a feeling that the corporate world would be kind of less approachable and less open. But it always comes down to the set of people that you get to work with. So I've had great experiences and not so great experiences in both fields. So I can't really answer that generally. What I would say is I've done 3 pieces of work. So it's going a little darker, but I've done 3 pieces of work for two police forces and one, the London Fire Brigade, where they were really tackling the very visceral subject of violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
And in the Fire Brigade's situation about a toxic culture. Mm-hmm. And they were some of the most just brilliant, moving sessions that I've ever been lucky enough to be witness to, because there was so much courage and really just courage really from the people that spoke. And I've never felt the responsibility greater to be able to represent that in a way that those people would recognize and be pleased about, or at least feel witnessed, and to do it in a way that people can absorb.
It's very engaging. Although the subjects are very difficult, it's a very engaging way to understand dynamics, which may be not that easy to understand if you just put bullet points. But if you put visuals to it, and those visuals are not disturbing, which, would be if there were actually some visuals from scenes or things of that ilk, which I'm sure they wouldn't put, but maybe, some kind of sketches that would be disturbed. It's a very delicate balance that you have to then go about doing, because I suppose that doing the same thing for a conference that has a theme that's very maybe light and if it's a business or anything of the ilk that is kind of optimistic a look on humanity, this is in fact a bit of a pessimistic view of humanity, and you have to bring some kind of engaging quality with that kind of visual.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you have it in the word humanity. It's always looking for that. I mean, for myself, because I have a kind of marketing background, I think what I have to be conscious of is a desire to always kind of look for the good and end on a good note and make a happy ending and come with a positive message. So I actually have to be really careful that I'm not trying to kind of sugarcoat it. And then you move into a different part of yourself, I think. Then you're starting to talk about that deep listening piece and really coming again, trying to surface the essentials of what's being said and expressed, and trying to keep the egotism of trying to be a good illustrator, which is, is probably the least important part of the job, but it's not unimportant, because, as you say, you want to create something that's engaging. You want to create something that people want to look at. But you're wrestling with so many things when you're doing it, and one of those is to get out of your own way, as we talk about in many other fields, and really to keep the focus on the experience that's in front of you and what's being said, and at a deeper level, which I wouldn't claim that I'm at, really being able to catch some sense of the consciousness of the room, and I would say that that's the sort of area that I'm looking to deepen my practice to be involved with.
You're translating experiences into visuals, and you're doing it in real time. So there must be part of you that's also engaged, because it is an artistic process, no matter that it is also a commercial process. It is primarily an artistic process in itself. Yeah. And there's always going to be part of you as somebody that's also in the environment, but being a scribe, which is a very interesting word, really, to denote what it is that you're doing. You're scribing.
Yeah, well, I think it's sense making, and the thing about the word scribing is that really it strikes me now. It really only tells you about the end part of the process, the bit where you put pen to paper, and of course the most work is done in the listening and the making sense and the pulling out. And I personally don't work live. If I have to, I will. But I have quite a strategic approach to the day. So I work out where the sessions lie, where there are breaks. And wherever I have a break, I go easy a bit on the recording. And what I tend to do is have an additional part of the process where I listen. I put things onto Post-it notes. As I'm listening, I might be sorting those. So kind of like the job that a non-visual facilitator would be doing. So I am thinking on lots of different parallel lines. And then when we get to the break, that has given me a precious extra 15, 20 minutes to process that, to try and find the most important part and build the picture from there.
And then afterwards, when you sit down with all your notes and with the effect the experience has had on you, I'm very interested in how long do you wait to actually create the world? So is it, because what I understood is part of it is done in situ.
You're still trying to get, in most cases, you're still trying to get all the content on the page by the day, or by the end of the day. So I would only, in theory, I'd only be taking it away to colour it in. And many, many, many scribes and graphic recorders finish on the day. So they finish everything.
What's the history of graphic recording? Do you know? I mean, when did it kind of start appearing in the world as such?
So I am not the person to ask about that, but there are many in my community that are. But what I do know is that it started in the 70s in San Francisco. So it has been going a while. I would say that I was probably like a third or fourth wave starting 10 years ago, and that there are many, many more people doing it who started doing it in the last 10 years. But I think it was, I'm going to be wrong here, so I hesitate to say it, but I think it was attached to systems thinking and management consultancy. It came out of there. And then was taken into the world.
And how did you start becoming a graphic recorder? What drew you in?
Well, I had always drawn as a child, and I always drew through my life, but I didn't do it with an aim to draw, really. I just drew because I couldn't not, but I drew during meetings. And I tried drawing cartoons, I think, when I was in my late 20s. And that was sort of mid-90s. So I sent it off to 5 broadsheets, I think, and got one person who was quite nice about it. And then I thought, oh, well, that's that, because I didn't know how to progress it. If it had been 10 years later, of course, I would have done a blog. But so I sort of let that go. And then I did all this coaching training, thought I was going to be a coach, realized I wasn't, and had to dig deep and remembered drawing, or at least understood. Someone asked me the question, which was one of the life-changing questions, which was, what can you not do?
Oh,
so
yeah. That's a pivotal one.
It really is.
What can you not live without?
Exactly. And I can't not draw. But I wouldn't have seen it in artistic terms. So it took being in the coaching environment to be able to, with people witnessing how you light up when you talk about it. And so with that guidance, I just moved back to drawing or towards drawing. And I became slowly aware of this thing. And then one day, one of my old bosses said, here's a book, read this. You can do this. Do it now. And it was just a time and place thing. And
I mean, this is, and also it's not only a pivotal question for anyone that is reaching some sort of saturation point where they need to make a decision about the next phase of their life, and they're not quite sure that they are going the way they should be going, although they put a lot of effort in something. As you said, that you train coaching, so presumably you were supposed to go on and become a coach, and then actually going backwards and getting to the point to what your passion is. And because
absolutely. I couldn't sell coaching. That was the thing that made me realize that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't sell it. So it wasn't aligned. It's that sense, because I was doing a lot of self-development and spirituality work, and people would always say, oh, when you find your thing, you'll be really aligned. And you sort of think, well, we'll see. And then that was how it was for me. So I couldn't sell coaching because I felt when I talked to people about it, I was in somehow saying that they were lesser and that I would help them to become more. And that didn't sit with me well. And of course, it's not the case. So a person who is a great coach would never approach it in that way. They would say, oh, how interesting, tell me more. And the person would see that this person could guide them to greater things. But I didn't have that sensibility. But once I really started putting the pieces together for this work, then everything did flow, and to quite an extraordinary degree. And I knew that I didn't want to become, at the age of 50, as I was coming up to 50, kind of end of my 40s, I didn't want to be an artist at home making pictures for myself, even though that was a nice thought. But I wanted to use what I already had. And so the joy of the work then and now is that it uses all of my skill sets. And
it's
and that is a truly,
it's an integration.
It is an integration, and it's a beautiful and precious thing for which I'm grateful every day.
This is a podcast on the magical reel, which is what...
Right. Excellent. Of course.
Which is, yes, because the idea of magic is a very personal thing. And what you're talking about really is, in a way, your magical ability. So I would like to go a little bit now into your childhood and the way that you discovered that you love drawing as a kid. When was it? Do you actually remember? Or was it always in your mind a part of who you are?
I remember because, I think the thing for me is it's about communication, because I remember the earliest memory I have of drawing and it lighting my fire was a friend of mine, parents, who was an extraordinarily extrovert person, and I actually found them a little bit too much. They're, in the family, we think he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful man, but I found it a bit overwhelming as a kind of 4-year-old. And then I think he sensed that brilliantly, and he took out a piece of paper and he drew 6 circles on it, and he basically drew cartoon expressions and showed me how, a smile made the difference and an upturned smile made the difference, and how the eyes pointing different directions made a difference. And I think it totally captivated me. And when I think about that, I think that actually it was the ability to communicate human sensibility that captured me as much as being able to draw. Because another early memory was, I won a prize for an Easter egg drawing, which was around the same time or a bit later, and that validation really helped. But the other strong memory was actually of writing a story, and having the teacher say, I think I was probably about 9 or 10 or 11 or something, saying, "Oh, this is as good as this could be in a book," kind of thing.
Wow.
And
that's something to hear. That's something to hear for a 9-year-old's ears, to be told that.
So I do think the words and the pictures are linked for me. It is about the communication of message. Yeah,
because when you draw, of course, there's it's a cartoon style. Am I correct?
Yes.
It's a cartoon style, so there's plenty of words there as well. And I always find that when I am particularly taken by a drawing, that it always has this caption that is, of course, is part of the story, but it kind of gives it the real twist. Right. So I can absolutely see the connection between the two. Funnily enough, I had a very similar experience, because the primary way that I expressed myself when I was those ages, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, and I mean all the way up to I think maybe 16, 17 was drawing, and writing was part of the drawing rather than the other way around. So it was not I was writing and I was illustrating what I was writing. It was I was drawing and then I was actually creating either a cartoon or maybe a film in my mind, because I was having these kind of aspirations, and that was, I think, for me, it was communicating with others at the same time communicating my thoughts to myself as well.
Yes.
Because only when I had like a good few hours in that world of drawing and story would I come out and then realign. I mean, it's now my 50-year-old self telling my probably 7-year-old self, oh, what you were doing is when you felt out of sorts, you sat down and wrote, and that's how you realigned yourself.
Totally.
At the time, I just thought, oh God, I have to go and draw.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I was wondering if that was a kind of a therapy as well, a self-help therapy, when you look at it now in your life.
That's a really interesting point. I think more writing than drawing, but I don't really know. I think clearly it was a therapy in terms of, I mean, actually, I think looking back, it's probably what we would say now is a mindful activity. And I think in that sense, I know I used words to work things out, and later I used words and pictures to work things out, but that would have been more, or certainly from a conscious point of view, that'd be more in my sort of 30s, 40s. But having said that, I think it was definitely a later thing, because when I started doing those cartoons in my mid-late 20s, that was definitely it was a release mechanism. So I'd gone traveling, my world had opened up, and then I'd come back to Britain in a bit of a recession. And so I had to go and work as a secretary in financial services. And I drew all these cartoons, and I drew these cartoons called Temp Bitch. And that really released a lot of.
Oh, I would like to see those.
I still have it.
Oh, I will then ask to see them at some point, because I mean you should really consider reissuing those.
Yes.
It might be very helpful to many people. You might be doing a service.
Well, and there's a visceral. I do look at them and I think, obviously you look at them and you think, oh, the drawing's not so good, but there's a visceral quality to them that I think, we're able to approach when you're simply venting, essentially. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, in a sense, it's a very sophisticated way of doodling during a meeting.
Yes.
It's really kind of taking it to art of doodling during meetings would be the Temp Bitch series, I think. You mentioned that you traveled. Where did you travel?
I traveled I spent a year in Australia when I was 27, a year in Australia and then 4 months in Southeast Asia.
And how was that? Do you care to expand on that, Caroline?
Well, it was incredible. I mean, I just was very stuck, and I was living a very nice life in London. But I recognized that my world was very small and I didn't know how to make it larger. So I mean, everybody I knew looked like me and I just didn't know how to expand my world. So I went and people were doing it, and people do. So I did a sort of gap year, but at the age of 27. And it was
that was
remarkable.
Where your gap was.
Yes, that's where my gap was. That's right. That's right. I was very fearful, and it made me less fearful. And it was just incredible. I mean, I had lots of loneliness and madness, and I definitely wrote a lot then. And yes, it opened everything up. I saw the world. I saw people. I had one guy who I'd met in London, and I met him at the end of my journey. I mean, at the end of my literal journey in Australia. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, oh, I've really changed my thinking and I now expect people to like me. It was like my whole system kind of split in two. It was like, I didn't know you could do that. So I sort of thought, right, I'm going to take that on. I'm going to expect people to like me. And it was, I'm sure if I'd heard that at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't have been able to hear it. But just a year. Yeah,
it would have sounded differently. It would have sounded different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think travel does something quite interesting to people, because I always found that while I'm traveling, I feel more alive than just being in one spot. And I thought maybe it's just a thing that is personal to me, or maybe it's something that's shared with other people. But the idea of a setting, once we're, settled somewhere, wherever it may be, and even if it's just for a shorter period of time, we start adapting to all the mores of the place and to why we're there, whether it's, reason for tourism reason, or it's a professional reason, or it's a relationship reason. But it's a different thing than while we are actually on the move. Because when one is on the move, you just need to be in yourself.
Yes.
Not so much outside, but in yourself, because you have to be aware of the environment, aware of the changes, what culture requires, what kind of communication, what things are the same, what things are different. And I find that brings us back to ourselves. I don't know if that was your experience of travel, but did you feel that it kind of going away brought you back to who you are, really? Rather than only expanding you to other places, maybe, made you return to your own self?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's really interesting. I think at that age it was more discovering, but discovering who you were and how you respond, because you're not very tested if you're living a very ordered life.
That's a very good, yeah, you not being tested does ring a bell.
And I think it's, yeah, and what you're saying about being inside yourself, I think that's true, but I think it's also the opposite, which, you know, obviously, as we know, is a good place to have both holding two things at once that seem to be opposite. But I actually think that part of the joy of it is you get out of yourself. Because I think certainly as a 27-year-old, I would have been in my head the entire time. And that's been a life's pursuit, right, to get out of my head, which I'm really only starting to do now.
I can, yeah, that definitely I can relate to. I think it is also probably an individual thing.
Yes.
As I was for a very long time, I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert introvert.
Yes.
Is that I can act as an extrovert, but really I am an introvert. And I think that as such, it was always a chore. I found it always to be a chore it took a lot of effort to be constantly aware of my environment. And only in travel do I feel light about it. So I don't really know. I mean, is it inside? Is it outside? I don't really know. But it just makes it so much easier.
Because
I have to be aware of the essentials. So maybe I don't go into the details too much.
Right. So that's almost like a meditation for you in terms of you're out of your head because you're dealing with all the things in front of you.
But I am in my body.
Yes. Okay.
My head. Yeah. Somehow. Yeah. Both at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe. But then that's good, isn't it?
Maybe I'm more in the body. Yeah. More. Less in the head, more in the body. The rest of the body. Right. Okay. Because it's still,
yes.
Part of my body.
So you're being present.
Thankfully, I'm more evenly distributed.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah. So then you traveled. I think we missed the part where you got educated. I'm interested in that part too. What did you do in terms of schooling?
So I had very particular schooling in the sense that my father was a doctor in the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
So we moved around, and so I went off to boarding school at 9, and I had a couple of years in a smaller place where my brother was. So that was relatively happy. And then I went to a convent when I was 11 to 16. And then my parents rescued me and took me out and put it into another one when I was 16.
I did not know that part of the biography. I mean, full disclosure, Caroline and myself are friends for a very, very long time. But this is, not something I knew.
Yes.
So you were in the boarding school. Yes. And how's that experience? I mean, this is something that people that are not born in the UK have only, I guess, a stereotypical idea of.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it would be nice to hear the insider's view.
Well, it did not suit me well, I can tell you. From 9 to 11, it was okay because it was a small place and we were kind of cared for, I would say. 11 to 16 was not good. It was the 70s. They're not like that now. They're brilliant now. But it was just, I didn't want to be separated from my parents. I had an extremely lovely family. And so that balanced it for me. But also because we moved around, I didn't have the sort of stability of friends at home. Mm-hmm. So I think I was quite sensitive, and it was not good for me. But what I would say is that I got a very, very good education. So I think that it was no worse than any other teenage experience, except with the added thing of not being able to go home in the evenings. But I had a really lovely family. So I would probably take it over, difficult family situation with a decent school kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you were in a position, to make changes to your past, you will still.
But it's taken me a long time to get there. I didn't like it because they were quite cold, really. And I would say that I wasn't. I mean, I was once caught with a piece of. So this is me trying to drama it up, because to prove the point that I have suffered, this is how I look at it now. So I still can't let go of these details.
Yeah, I can commiserate with that, because when we met, because we have known each other for a very long period of time, but we haven't. We kept in touch, but we haven't had periods when we would be just kind of hanging out. So we had an intense meeting, and then didn't see each other for 3 years or 4 or 5. Or even more, but we did keep in touch. So that's kind of, I know bits of your story, and then bits I'm like, really? But what I found interesting is when I first met you, and now I realize what that is you felt very, very familiar to me. And there's something about the way you came across and your friendliness and your openness that really resonated. And I was thinking, I could immediately start talking to you. Was no really need for any introductions. And I was thinking, because my past is not too dissimilar, as I left Yugoslavia when I was 5, and we went to and I went to kindergarten for a very short period of time, and then we went to Tehran, Iran. Wow. And that was in the mid-70s.
Right.
So it was still during the Shah time, so pre-Islamic Revolution. Yeah. I went to an American school there, and I really got along. I really loved it. So right. Immediately I just blended in, and I loved it. And it was an international school, so we had all sorts of nations there. We had a UN day was the day. Yes. It was our main thing. So it was, there were, let's say, 50% Americans and then 50% everybody else. And it was a slightly experimental school, so it was very loose, and it was, I think, quite a lot of 70s new kind of psychology, humanistic psychology applied to how now, from this point of view and from this vista, I can see what they were doing, and they were doing really great things with us kids in terms of how they let us develop skills, and were very open with just, let us being who we are. And then very shortly, before the revolution happened, but I think there were already signs of things about to happen, we returned to Yugoslavia, and I went back to my socialist school. Wow. With my hippie ideas about how schooling should be, from the Americans.
And what age were you then?
I was 9. Wow. And so it wasn't like you that changed quite a lot of environments and then went to a boarding school. But there's something that I find similar in kids that needed to get really great changes within an early environment in terms of education. And then with you, it's the family and the schooling. With me, it's the American school and the Yugoslavian school. The school was fine. It was just very old school. It was just very strict, and the kids weren't that great, and they found me very odd, and I found them odd as well.
Yes.
So I think that when we first met, now in hindsight, I hear also this part of your story. I just then understand. Okay, we're both people that needed to adapt to our environments real quick.
Yes.
And it shows, I think.
I think so too.
And when you have that imprint in your past.
Yes. I think so too.
You don't kind of keep your rigid thing, you just go, okay, so this is where we're at now. Let's get rolling.
You exactly, adapt is right. And it's so interesting for me to hear what you've said as well. I didn't know that myself. So yes, I do see that similarity. I think you do adapt. You get very good at it. So I make friends very quickly, very deeply. Don't necessarily, maintaining is a different thing for me. But it's what do you leave behind? You get that talent, you get that ability, which is enormously useful in life.
Yeah, yeah.
But what
And
do you
also
leave behind?
The maintaining is also being able to, every time that you meet a person that
Yep.
is your friend, you just slip into that story, and
Yes,
it doesn't
yes.
have to be. It doesn't have to be something that becomes a chore. It is something that is really felt and lived, and I just feel like it's like a river. You know, sometimes it goes this way, sometimes it goes that way, but it's always flowing and it's always alive.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think there's two parts of that again. One is that everything you describe is the total joy of my life. It's like I have friends, as I'm sure you do, in different places.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I can pick it up and it is the same. And there's no issue about keeping in touch or not keeping in touch. When you get to meet, it is just joyful. But then I also think that one of the consequences for me outside of that was that I did find it very difficult to be restricted in any way. And I don't know if that's just my natural personality, but I definitely felt like I labeled myself as a commitment phobe. And I don't have any regrets about that because I'm grateful for the way my life has worked out. And I see it all as that I think I was conscious for most of it. You know, I mean, I could have made different choices. I chose not to. So I'm happy with the fact that I took choices. But I think it did make me always on the run kind of thing.
I can. Yeah.
And maybe that's just a creative and artistic pursuit, trying to understand the world and my place in it and how I could contribute and how I could express myself. And so that's also brought enormous freedom. I think I was very reluctant to have something that would threaten that pursuit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are somewhere always on the spectrum between security and freedom.
Yeah.
You know, we can pinpoint where we are. I think everybody can pinpoint where they are very easily on that spectrum. Maybe different times we veer more towards one or the other. But I think that now that you're telling me this, I think, well, yeah, maybe every person, if I ask, so what is more important to you, security or freedom, they would know what to answer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I really want to stop just for 1 second to appreciate, because I hadn't really appreciate the joy that it is to be able to be the person that can have those relationships where you can dip in and come out and it's the same. And I do have several of those, and I've always taken that for granted. But I think, you know, this conversation is making me really appreciate that maybe that isn't the case for someone. It's like, I don't understand those kind of restrictions where people, for example, will say, oh, you can't be friends with your ex-boyfriends. It's like, that's a deal breaker for me. You know, if people are in my life who I love, then why would I lose them? I'd rather do the work and be able to have a healthy relationship. And then I want as many people in my satellite friendship world as possible. And perhaps our upbringing gives us a special ability that has a kind of normalcy, whereas it isn't necessarily in other people's map, it occurs to me.
I think that you're absolutely right. Yeah. I think that is because we experienced it without really having a choice.
Yeah,
you know, we really didn't have any choice whatsoever.
Yeah.
We had to go through that because that's where our families were at. And as a child, you don't have choices that adults do. So you just have to go where you're told. Yeah. You have very small amount of agency to say, well, maybe not this or that, but not in a major sense. And I think because you then see that it's not all that bad, and that you can, within what you're given, you can find your creative way, and you can understand. In my Yugoslavian school, it took me a couple of years, but then I realized, okay, so I can't be friends with everybody,
right?
Like in the American school,
right. Very different.
And but I can then find people I really like and be friends with them. And that was for me like a revelation,
Yes.
I can have my people, and they can, like they can also choose me, obviously. It has to be.
Yes. Yes.
But it was very easy because I just let go and kind of went, well, let's see, and just be very open about what works and what doesn't. And I had to figure that out early on.
Yes.
That you don't really have to hang out with people you don't like. And people really don't have to hang out with you if they don't like you,
God, you're so right. You're so right. Because I am really quite good at letting people go where it's not working for me.
Yeah, you had to. I think it's obviously you as well, and not just, totally, the background, totally. But I'm sure it facilitates.
Because sometimes you realise you're not working for someone else, and then you have to let that go as well.
Yeah, yes, because I think that people that don't have that experience, I can see people stuck, not just in like love and relationship is a different, possibly a different thing, because there are other things.
Yes.
In that equation, not just with friendship, which is much easier, and also family relationships, also a different thing. But within friendships, it's just like, is it working? Is it not working? Do we have mutual love and respect for each other? And is it interesting? And it's not, no big deal. But I think people have a great problem with viewing this and then stay with people that are possibly, to use that overused word, toxic for them for very long periods of time without no need. It's fine. People don't need to be friends. They can just choose people that bring you joy and that find your presence joyful and your friendship joyful. And I think that's something that you learn when you're uprooted a couple of times when you're young, and also I think I know for myself, and I mentioned a little bit, but what about you? If you would put yourself in a kind of introvert extrovert spectrum, because drawing is such a private experience, right? It's you're sitting and
Well, I would say I kind of had the Myers-Briggs done when I was early 30s, I think. Yeah. And I was almost off the scale extrovert, or at least I was not exaggerating. I was high-end extrovert.
Wow. Okay. Right. I wouldn't have known. There you go. I mean, yes.
Well, I would say it's changed.
Like high-end.
Yeah. I would say it's really radically changed, and I think the reason for that is that certainly on the principle that extrovert means that you get your energy from outside of yourself. I think I still, despite what I've said about the loveliness of being able to adapt and to have friendships and trust them and all the rest of it, I also was very insecure and I'm a terrible people pleaser, and that remains really.
I hear you, sister.
Yeah. So
I hear you.
I have built up the confidence, and I think a lot of that has come from my work recently. And then I'm very conscious that you can't, solely get your confidence from your work. But so I definitely have become more and more introvert, and I don't know whether that is following the work, because as you say, you do need to go inside for that, or I don't know which has driven which side of that's driven each other. But I'm definitely more and more. And I've never been a group person. So I've never been someone who has a group of friends. I now have a group of friends that I had in my 20s, and we've kind of reconnected, and there is no feeling of home like that. And I have a group of women in my work life that are connected as a friendship group. And that also I feel very comfortable with. I mean, extremely comfortable with. But generally, if I see a group and I'm in a group, I will pick people off one by one and have one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
And woof, that's my modus operandi.
Yeah. I can, and I think that's for me. I could figure that out. Of being such a rubbish networker, I'm just
do it one by one. You just do it one by one.
That's exactly the only way, that I can't really do it any different way. And it's very hard for me to kind of work a room. I worked at some points in my life in places and kind of jobs where this would be something that you do.
Yes.
And I was just like so bad at it. But I do make good business relationships. Like that was my forte.
I bet.
You know, so that was like, okay, she's really bad at kind of chit chat, but like if she gets
I've been talking to you for a minute and you've just got my entire backstory out of me.
But yeah, again, send her to kind of create a business relationship. She'll do that.
Yes.
I think that one-to-one thing is so important because it could be like a small group dynamic. Let's say there's like a couple of people and it's intense chat. Like that's also something that's, you know. But I mean, my Myers-Briggs is INFP. So I'm.
So I'm ENFP.
Okay, well there you go. So we're just two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Yes. But I'm unemployable. You know, so because
likewise.
So you're slightly more employable because of the.
Well, I don't. Well, yes, I suppose so. Yeah. But it is that intense chat, isn't it? I'm the same. I want within a minute, people will be telling me stuff, and it's just that listening thing, isn't it? And the real curiosity. You're genuinely interested in anybody's story, anybody's passion. It's always just, as long as I'm not feeling completely crazy, so that I can't communicate at all, then that's what I want to know. And in my experience, if you can ask the right question in the right way, people will tell you anything.
I think it's also that's it, because people
in the most lovely way.
Yeah, the openness and relatability, but I think also, and that's the P part of the
because we want to communicate.
No judgment. Yeah.
Yes, right.
No judgment. It's so it's, I think, a huge weight off a person's back when they can actually feel that you're listening to them without that dreaded judgment. I mean, although judgment is sometimes a good thing to have, especially in friendships and in life generally, but I think the perception bit is why it works so well in terms of people opening up. And that's my experience too, is very, very similar to yours, as in like people just tell me their life story.
Yeah, which is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
such a beautiful thing.
And I'm engaged. You know, like I go into like
Yes.
And which brings us really neatly to coaching. When did you start being interested in becoming a coach?
I think in my mid-40s, I realized that I needed a career change because I needed to do something I was more interested in. And as someone once said to me, you know, I would always have conversations with now it would be the younger people in the office sort of thing, the sort of 20-year-olds, and just ask them what they wanted. And I remember one girl saying, oh, no one's ever asked me what I want. And then someone else said, oh, have you just given her, are you a life coach? And she said it with a sort of really positive sounding interpretation. And I thought, oh, I didn't know that was a good thing. It had just been parodied a lot, I think. So I thought, oh, maybe that's a good thing. So I went on, I thought, right, well, I'll start there. And I did start there. And I spent about 5 years studying and followed I started basically with basic coaching, and then I went into NLP, so it's getting a bit more sort of like abstract.
I remember us discussing it.
And then I went
time.
Yeah, and then I went into the spiritual stuff. So yes, NLP has been enormously useful for me in terms of understanding how I work and therefore how I can change.
In terms of language, I always found it, because I had it a little bit, and we learned a little bit about it in college.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, because I think it was at the time because I studied psychology here in Serbia, and managed even to graduate, which
Yay.
is, yeah. I never really had a practice, but it was applied in all the other things that I did. So, it's like a part of every single thing I do, even this conversation.
Yes.
But we learned about, the cognitive and behavioral psychology and everything that NLP comes from, really. So it's like the origins of NLP, really.
Yes.
So I can get it really quickly. But because for me, I am more intuitive, and according to Myers-Briggs, so are you. I always found it too
mechanical.
Yeah. I wanted to say mathematical, but mechanical is maybe even better.
Well, and that's only because most people that teach NLP teach it really badly and miss the point about it, I think. And the person that I studied under, Michael Breen, who's a genius, just an incredible person. But
what did you say his name was? Because I think there was a car.
Oh, sorry. Well,
nobody's going to hear that name now.
So he is called, I'm not sure if he does it anymore, but he's called Michael Breen, Breen. But he said, NLP is not a job. It's like, It's not a thing. You're not an NLP. I mean, people would say they're an NLP practitioner, but I think he very rightly said, it's a tool. It's a useful thing. And the way that he taught it, I cried through most of it, but the way he taught it has remained with me for 10, 15 years. And only because it was, helping me essentially endlessly catch myself just with the rubbish of the brain. He used to say to us, "You think you're thinking," and I had no idea what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, what he was saying was, it's just all this rubbish we have in our heads and the patterns.
It's mindless chatter. Yeah, well, that we brand as thinking, but it's actually just
exactly. And the judgments and the language. To look at the language was glorious, and I'm very careful about my language now as a result.
Yeah.
But people will teach it as a series of techniques that you do to someone, and that is very much not what he did. So
yeah, I mean, it's. I think NLP should be actually practiced in the Balkans a bit more.
Oh, right.
Because it really, honestly, kind of after 20 years in London and came to Serbia, not to stay really, but then I stayed because the pandemic hit.
Oh,
and
yes.
And then it kind of went on from there, and just the way that people talk to each other, it's like,
God.
The fact is not what it's said, but how normal it is.
Yes.
It's saying like the most awful things in like a most normal tone, like just a very casual kind of thing.
Gosh.
Yeah,
Yes.
you don't get that in London, and people are not that careful with language in London. But that's not even, this is off the scale here. And it's not like I didn't know. It's just that because I didn't find myself in a longer period of time being in, the place of my birth, and also seeing the changes, because a lot of things have changed here. Like you wouldn't get that in ex-Yugoslavia stuff. It's just all the wars and just the way that people got hardened during the periods of war, and the way that changed generations. I mean, that's a whole different story. But when talking about language, it did create a kind of a communication that if people pay just a bit more attention on how they talk, it's like, no, don't say that. But it's a normalized thing. So it is very important.
It's so stressful.
To be mindful about what you say and how you say it and how it affects us. The way things are going on here, it's very clear that it's not working, that the language should be taken into account as well as everything else. But I want to ask you a little bit more about that. The other thing that you said, you went into something more spiritual.
Yes.
What was it?
So I actually found this energetic NLP. So it was a kind of fusion of energy work and NLP practices. And that took me into more sort of energetic work in general. And I think that was really helpful. And I think I'm kind of coming full circle and revisiting that in my current work, in the sense that it's a lot about, so obviously coaching is about holding the space, and then the spiritual work and the energetic NLP, and I worked with a man called Art Geyser who taught us a lot of great things, and again practices that I still use to this day, but it's very much about then, so if you're talking coaching on an essential level about you're holding the space, then I think it sort of is taking that into a different dimension. And what I've been learning about recently, I mean, as in this last week, has been really holding that space for our participants when we're graphic recording as well, even if you're not the facilitator. So I think the whole practice was, the spirituality practice was really about, you know, the essential principles of releasing and releasing things you don't want.
More like body work? So it was it?
Yeah, yes, it was, in the sense that it was a lot about clearing and then re-nourishing. So you could clear using visual metaphors or felt sensations, or you did readings of people. So some people might get pictures, some people might get feelings, other people might get words, or you could get any number of those. And essentially you helped yourself and other people clear those and then bring in energies that would be supportive.
Funny enough, I always thought of myself as a visual person.
Yes.
If you would ever ask me, I would say, yeah, I'm a visual person. And then one of my friends that I met through work, he's an ex-ballet dancer. And so we were chatting, and then he was asking me a couple of questions, and, in the morning, I can't even remember what he was asking me, to be honest. It was just like, oh, in the morning, do you do this? And then do you do that? And then he said, do you know what? You're actually kinesthetic.
Yes. I can totally believe that. Yes.
And I was like, really?
Yes.
Because I was always very clumsy and always really in my mind, and always really in that overusing my intuitive function, because that's my kind of dominant one. And sensation is the opposite. So I always thought, right, okay, so like, I'm not definite. But then through all the experiences and the way I learn, and it's like completely kinesthetic. And that helped me out, because then I got to understand that through something that overusing one thing and being able to learn through a different thing is actually could be quite cool, because then I could re-educate myself in a way about certain things that I took for granted. And then the clumsiness also became clearer to me, because if people would just show me something, I wouldn't be able to replicate it. Right. Even worse it would be if they would tell me something without showing me. I wouldn't be able to replicate it. But if I would do it at least once, I would immediately be able to replicate it.
Yes.
And it's the same thing like with driving my car. For me, the most mindful exercise is driving my car, because that's the only place where the mind chatter stops.
Wow.
Because immediately when I start driving, I'm super present. I'm available, to what's going on, and pay attention. I love the feel of driving the car. I'm also a careful driver, although I love driving. So At the same time, that's part of it, is being careful. And I didn't drive for a very long time in London, so I started driving here again, like I'm now making up. I drove. Well, it was now not the summer, but the one before, I drove all the way to Peloponnese, like through, Serbia, Macedonia, and Greece, and all the way, down, and went to Delphi and stuff, and did it all alone. And I loved doing it. Like, it was just,
yes.
but that was the thing, because I had to pay attention, and I loved the physical side of it, of being able to be like very careful and to kind of, that stopped my mind chatter. So my therapy is really to do something that requires precision and presence, and physical.
Yes.
So, and then when you say that you did the spiritual practice, how did you find yourself quite comfortable in the practice? Did it pique your interest, let's say, in finding a little bit more about the spiritual side of things and life?
I think it did. I found it all very difficult. Lots of tears again, and endless frustrations. And I think I learned quite. I found learning about myself. I mean, I've been doing it since I was 4, but in terms of contemplating myself and stuff, but it never seemed to get any easier. I think it is easier now. So I was interested. I was really piqued by it, and I did go off in lots of different directions. And I know that big conversation that you and I had when we really first sat down together, there was so much that you told me about your intuition, where it had played out in places in quite dramatic circumstances sometimes. And I remember them very viscerally. I remember that conversation very viscerally. And I was probably in that period at the time, I think. But I think what happened was that I kind of used it to shed a lot of stuff and grow in my artistic endeavours and in my confidence. And then, honestly, I think I kind of left it by the wayside a bit whilst I spent 10 years building up my business. And I feel literally this week. Well, I had this holiday in New Zealand. I hope it's not too much of a detour, but
no, that's what we're here for.
Well, I had this holiday.
Details and detours. Details and detours. That's where we're at here.
Yeah, that's a good name. So we had a holiday in New Zealand, and it was my partner's daughter lives there, and we went out to see her, and I had about 2.5 weeks there, I think. And I was also visiting an old friend who I hadn't seen over 20 years, who I adore, but hadn't seen for 20 years. And so it was a big trip. And Pete and I we stayed with 2-3 people, and we did road trips in between and slept in the car. And that was fantastic. And the landscape kind of obviously blew me away. And I was there. When I went traveling at 27, I was in Australia. So obviously it had similarity in terms of being a reasonably, a small population for a big landscape. So the massive, massive, massive landscape and being no people. So I felt some kind of opening happening. And it was really just in the last couple of days. And I didn't know what it was, but I just felt something in me opening up. And I think I had a particularly amazing night where we'd managed to park somewhere where we had just that 360 view of the stars, where you can see it from the horizon line all around you. And then followed up by more incredible. And we'd swum with his daughter in a bit of sea that had phosphorescence.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh God, I mean, it was so magical. And again, I had only experienced that once, which was in Malaysia on that trip when I was 27. Mm-hmm. So there was kind of all this connecting back and forth. And I was also coming to it from a point of frustration, because I knew that I was getting quite itchy about the job that I'm doing now, which I love so much. But knowing that I needed a shift, and not knowing what that shift was, and being okay with that. So that's sort of 10, 20 years of personal development got me to the stage of the fact that I was okay with not knowing and trying trusting that it would become clear, and just thinking, just keep putting one step in front of each other and keep doing things, even though you don't know what you're doing. And, it will come clear. Don't sit in a corner and be miserable. Just keep moving. So I had some kind of, and I can't pinpoint it as an experience, possibly that night with the stars and definitely the night with the phosphorescence. But then I sort of really felt it in the last couple of days, because I was just drawing so effortlessly. And then we came back and I came into a really busy period, and it felt like I had to shut that opening down. And I was absolutely furious for a month. And I was just like so angry.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Oh,
I can. Oh God. Yeah. I can
livid.
Imagine. Yeah.
So I was being very grumpy. Oh yeah, just so angry. But sort of bearing with it. And I think on some level, and again, more being in the body probably, and I'm not much in my body, thinking, well, that's okay. This is what this is. Just keep putting one step in front of another. And then in the last couple of weeks, I had a really large contract fall through, and suddenly I have all this space. And so obviously I'm worried about money, but somehow there is this sense that I'm trying to make myself worry about that. I mean, it's a genuine concern, but and then in the last week, 2 weeks, it's just taking some space. And then this last week, I did this course with a woman called Kelvie Bird, who's miraculous. And she writes about generative scribing, and she is very energetic, energy focused. It's all about holding the space, about opening and softening. And from that, being able to surface the essential, which is a phrase that I'm just writing on every wall now. It's obviously not a new concept to me, but just doing it within the context of her teaching.
I think you probably with the New Zealand trip, you went back to your sweet spot, because it's the same thing with me and driving, I guess.
Right.
It's like, okay, yeah, so I really like to be on the road. I like to be alone. I like to drive my car, and I just like to just discover things. And that's my meditation.
Yes.
That's how, and who's to say that it's the wrong kind of meditation?
No.
For me, it's exactly the right one. And I think that although I have a constant communication, let's say, with the elements, because that's just how I am. I always need to be communicating with environments, and because there's a great deal of an animist in me, for me everything's alive.
Yes.
So
me too, I think
you will find me communicating with my car, and so on and so on and so on. But I think that the most free and the most open I am is in those kinds of things that are very particular. Some people find driving very stressful. For some reason, I don't. And the same thing. So it's like your sweet spot is very particular to you, and it gives that kind of energy. It is that particular kind of funnel, that has that particular kind of opening that is the right fit for, what it is that how you need your energy renewed. And I think that kind of losing that and the anger you felt is actually a really good sign, because you need more of it.
Yes. I felt it was a good sign, to be honest. It was like, well, I'm angry about something. That means there's something to be angry about, which is good.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
It's denying yourself something that is a lifeblood.
It felt like that.
Yeah, you need that. You need that thing every so often to fill your tank. And for all the listeners listening, find your sweet spot and what your tank is filled with, and go for it, because it doesn't have to be something that is prescribed. And I think that's very important to know.
Definitely. And also, because as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, I can't go to New Zealand every a couple of weeks. But then, of course, it's because I allowed myself to get so stuck that actually it felt like it needed something a bit dramatic to kind of open it.
Maybe Cornwall. I don't know.
Yeah,
New Zealand.
exactly. Well, Scotland's pretty good for
Scotland,
large open space.
Yeah.
But I think it's more about sometimes you do need a bit of a jolt, and then you can connect in ways that you already know how to, but that you're not. It's
like a micro thing. It's the same thing.
Yes.
I mean, maybe I can't go to Greece or whatever, but maybe I can go to kind of some local archaeological dig because I love archaeology.
Right.
And spend just a day just doing that and return more energized instead of sitting and worrying because I'm also a freelancer. Why are things not happening?
I think so. And I'm sure that things will, or at least I believe that things will shift for me. And I don't know if you have this sense as well, but the more I connect with those things and the more I tie myself up, obviously we have to be pragmatic beings and we need to pay the bills, etc. But but in parallel to that, I do think if I, by shifting things and developing my practice and going into different levels and different understandings.
I want to ask you all the time, and now I remember that I wanted to ask you, did you ever think of making a book of your cartoons? Because I would like to have like a book of your cartoons, like to make it physical. Not just online and digital, but actually to have it like a physical thing.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really consider them interesting enough, I suppose. And I don't.
How dare you?
Thank you.
We do. No, they're just so amazing. They are really. I mean, to be honest, Caroline, you're not far off. Like, I like the New Yorker cartoon bit. Like, who doesn't? But yours remind me of it. And I think you're really selling yourself short on it, honestly. So, just a little thought maybe of kind of, just making it into a book. And also, now this I wrote down and I wanted to ask you this because that's an important thing to kind of root experiences, because I would like also for people, because you're very, very good at putting together things that are very creative, but also that are business orientated. And we don't have many of those on this program. Right. So if you don't mind telling me a little bit about what would you be like your perfect gig, if there is any favorite gigs that you have, and what is first that, and then I'll ask you another question that will be more like an advice.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's something that's shifting for me. What is my perfect gig? It used to be kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of a high-paying corporate gig. I
mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I mean, why not?
I come from the principle that everything is interesting and everyone needs help, as it were, in terms of support, in terms of having their message clarified and made better, and that all people, in my opinion, are looking for human connection. So I see the work that I do, one of my focuses is always human connection. And I was really interested, just to diverge a little bit, about what you said about how everything's alive for you. Everything's alive for me as well.
Yeah.
I just, exactly. Everything in my life has a personality, from the perfume bottle to the car,
And one can see it in your work. It is a complete world. It's a little peopled planet.
Oh, well, thank you. And that is something I strive for a lot. It's trying to get the movement into a piece is really key. So what has become the ideal gig is where people are interested and treat you well. And by treat you well, I mean care about what you're doing and care about the usefulness of what you're doing. So the greatest compliment someone can give me is, this is really interesting because I'm realizing that that's shifting as well. So it would have been, the greatest compliment they could give me would be something like, we've used it a lot. So we have it up in the staff room or in the office, and you can see something new every time you look at it.
Yeah.
And they would sort of say, and they might take bits of the picture out and use it on the mirror. This is so interesting because I'm realizing I had quite a mechanical view of what good use of it is until literally a week ago. So that would be how I would think it would be, how I would measure my success, that they used it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm realizing I want to shift into now is where it's allowed people to see themselves, that I think I already had, but see themselves, see how they fit in, and where it can bring about change wherever it's wanted. So we do that with writing, don't we? You can, and films, of course. That's how I connect to the world and myself. My understanding has been films. It's another thing that unites us. But so an ideal
transformative potential of it.
Yeah, I think so. And that it's that thing where you do your best, you put it out there, and then you let it go. So you're there to witness, to surface the essential, and people will find what they find. So an ideal job is one that pays me respectfully and where I can contribute, and that the people are nice people. That becomes more and more important. I'll do because I notice when people aren't nice, however much they're paying for me, and I do try to resist this, but a bit of me shuts down.
Right.
I fight it. I do fight it. I am conscious of it. And I recognize that maybe it's people's communication skills rather than intent. Sometimes it's intent, but very rarely. Most people are nice. So sorry, that's a very wordy, not clear answer. But
no, I think it ties in really well for the next question is of advice to the starving artist, because it's food.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the respectfulness and to be paid respectfully for your work is essential. And I think that creative people, myself being one of them, but also so many others that I know, struggle with that aspect of our work, because creativity is also a pleasure. So, okay, so you're having pleasure in your work and you're also asked to be paid for it. And I just think, wow, that's a conundrum. Why wouldn't you enjoy your work, first of all? And then secondly, why wouldn't you be paid respectfully and handsomely for it? So, but that's just in the mind. I mean, I come from a different culture than yours because I come from socialism. So it's like but we all have one thing in common, creative people, is that we do not easily translate into the business world and understanding what our work is worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So any advice? Any other than what you already said, which is really good advice, and that is, what you expect from a good gig?
Well, I mean, you can expect all you like, can't you? But it's getting the work. So it's always, there's lots of parts to that. I think we do have to detach, and that's not I didn't find it easy, but we have a perception that if we find, so number one is we have a perception that if we find it easy, it's therefore valueless or of less value. So it's really hard to detach yourself from that point. But things that can help you with that is people need art and artists, particularly in difficult times. We know that. We know that creativity increases during difficult times. I mean, I've got no basis for that, except that I've just heard that twice this week, and it's interesting.
And you have it in your own experience and in the experience of people around us, as we just know. Also, the best art comes from the worst parts of history. So it's just it's in the art books.
yes, exactly. Good. Well, you've got the foundation for that. I've got no foundation. But yes, exactly that. So there is a need for it. So it's not just a lovely, fluffy thing. Another thing is that that helps me is you think about, can other people do it? So often they can't. So just because we find it easy doesn't mean it's valueless, because, I mean, obviously it's not valueless, but it's trying to reason with the brain. Not everyone can do it. People keep saying to me, well, not everyone can do it. And you sort of think, yes, but I live in a world that's full of graphic recorders and scribes and visual thinkers. So in my world, everyone can do it. But I have to
yeah, in your very, very tiny corner of the universe.
Exactly. A very niche world.
Peopled with people that are, very, very visually talented, but not, generally, the general populace. Yeah, that's a very good thing. It's like when I was thinking about what is it that I can do best, like when I'm really realistic with myself and let go of, wishes and projections of my parents and all of those things, and just be honest and like, what is it that I really know how to do really well? And it's always writing. Yes. It's always writing.
Yes.
But with that, other than the talent, it's like so much work, because I did so much, like did marketing, I did translation, I did all sorts of kinds of, work that is absolutely not, well, it is creative, but it's not like, writing a poem. I wrote a lot of poems as well. So it's a constant honing. And only now can I say, well, now I can actually put, well, not my hand to paper because I usually type, but let's say, my hand to paper and make it sound exactly the way I want to.
Oh, yes. I understand that. Yeah. That's like, it's like I can see something in my head now and I can draw it. It's only a cartoon, but it is a cartoon. But yes.
Yeah, it's exactly the way you want it, and that is not something that I can say I was able to do 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's like,
so that's taken 20 to 30 years of labor to get to.
Yes, although I had that exact same talent then. It didn't suddenly appear, but the talent was not enough.
Right.
The work needed to be put in.
Yes.
And it always, I mean, I don't know if this is a true tale or it's an apocryphal tale, but it's a story about Picasso, who, so there's different, of course, with those kind of things, there's different settings, and I'll just say the gist of it.
Yes.
He said, oh, well, you did this, like something that it'll take you like a couple of minutes. And he said, well, yeah, a couple of minutes and 40 years.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's the worth of that, not that I'm comparing us to Picasso, but why not, anybody is serious about their work. They know that it takes that amount of time. For some people, it's a quicker thing, some people are really good at really early on, but then other things happen to them, and as like to many artists and writers that I know, is that they're great and then they start repeating and copying themselves, and then afterwards they're just not that great. And I think that is because very early on they peaked, they got into their stride, but the other part requires work, and that work is also living a life. Yes, because our material is also life.
Yes.
I remember, like, my dad was really, he's such a lovely man, and he was always really, really supportive. But I was complaining something, like, we were talking, I was in London and he was in Novi Sad in Serbia, and he was like, oh, so how are you doing? And I was like, oh, this and that, and, not good. And he said, well, you know what? You're a writer. You have to live your life. If you don't go to troubles, what are you going to write about?
That's nice. Yeah, very true.
So you said something that I wanted to kind of end with, because it was really important for me in terms of something that I was thinking about in terms of my own business, and that is to look at the market.
Yes.
And I think you said, see what is it that people need.
Yes.
And for me, it was like a revelation. Oh, really?
Oh. Well, I'm very strong on that, because I think this, it's really important to, I mean, none of us, it's very unlikely, or, okay, so again, words are important. So it's a high desire to be able to do all of your work as paid work, or that your work life as an artist would be 100% in line with what you're wanting to do. So there'll always be explorations and creativity that's outside of what you're earning a living from, because that's the nature of the development. And hopefully, so actually the best clients for me are the ones that allow me to be doing my exploring on their time, as it were. And they do that because they trust me to bring the best of myself, and they don't mind if it's my evolving self, because actually that's the most interesting. But most clients aren't going to have that kind of vision. But so I would say that I got quite pragmatic, because when I moved into this work, I thought, I can't change at 50 from a quote proper job and then be trying to earn money through my art. So I would be thinking, so my thinking was, what will people pay for? And that was my mantra, and it was really quite brutal. But I was just trying to get curious about that and have it as a really genuine question. Most people don't want to spend money needlessly, and they will spend it if they get something in return. And that might be as simple as a decorative thing to have in their house, but it's most likely to be something that moves them decoratively. So I am obsessed with ceramics and will buy something that moves me. So that's a value in itself. People will pay for that. They will pay to have beauty, to have truth in beauty, to have beauty in their house, to have something that makes them feel good, that's decorative. That's entirely a value. For myself, I'm more in the pragmatic areas. So when I try to think about what will people pay for, I think in terms of businesses, they'll pay if you save them money. They'll pay if you bring in more money. They'll pay if you save them time. In my sense, particularly, they'll pay if you can. Essentially, people will pay if you can do something that they can't do cheaper, quickly, more easily themselves. And so they'll pay if you can communicate something that they're having a struggle communicating. And that might be what I do, or it might be through, I'm talking to a client that may be having someone do an interpretive dance. There have been people who use poets within conference to kind of do a sort of rap at the end of the conference. So it's really trying to understand, yes, what do people need, but what will they pay their hard-earned cash for? What are you delivering beyond the product itself? It's like the meaning that you're giving them, or the service. I mean, in my business, some people don't care. They just think, oh, it'll be cool to have someone doing a graphic recording at our conference. I've seen those around. We must have one. That's fine. I'm happy to do that. But it's the least value thing, because that person will never hire me again because they don't see the value of it. So my job is to share the value of it in my communications on social media. And social media is, it is the thing that helps. And it's irritating that it's there, but it's better that it's there than it isn't. And I think, and I mean, I need to get better at this myself, but I think it's really, really helpful to, if you have work that can go out, as it were, whether it's writing or drawing or you're making something, whatever it is, you just keep putting it out there, even if you haven't got people listening, because he puts you in the mindset of that you are expressing and communicating about your work. And I think in the world we live in, we need to express and communicate about our work. That is the job. The job is creating things. But in my mind, and I say this as a sort of marketing bias, so if it doesn't resonate, forgive me, but it's my opinion that is the job. The job, if it's going to be a job, something that pays you, then the job is about communicating about what we do. And we are creatives. So it's reaching deep for me. I think it's reaching deep. And what do I really want to say about this? And I've done lots of long posts about my work on LinkedIn. And I think that's worked quite well for me. But I realized that actually I need to do a lot more surface stuff as well so that I have a volume. And again, that sounds quite clinical. But as long as you can get yourself to a heart-centered place and go, okay, I'm now going to put up lots of little pictures. So I did a picture about inclusion. And I really spent a good 2 or 3 hours to think about how can I visualize the word inclusion in a way that's not so cliched that I see in every other place I look. So that deserves a post on LinkedIn. Small things will work as well. So
it's a step by step. It's a daily practice.
Yes.
I'm really loving what you're saying, because it's exactly that. It's a writer needs to write every day. A painter needs to paint every day. A creative needs to create every day. If it's your job, it's a daily thing. It's not sometimes, it's every day. And if it's something that you will live from, because you need to, like, everybody needs to eat and pay their rent and do all of the things that and also have a great time and also travel and not limit yourself, then it's something that needs to engage an audience.
Yes.
And that is an important part of who we are. Audience and the other person is equally important in any sort of art than is artists themselves. Yeah.
Yes. And you do need volume because people won't see it. And it doesn't matter if it's not great. You follow it up with another one tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't practice what I preach, but I think about it a lot. And when I run out of work, then I definitely practice it.
Yeah, and I think it's also, because the volume will make it less disheartening if people are not immediately attracted to what you do. And funnily enough, the people, for instance, the people that I follow on YouTube and less on Twitter or X, but more on YouTube and Instagram to up to a point, is that they're not accounts with a huge following.
Yes.
They're accounts with a loyal following.
Yes, exactly.
And what one needs is a loyal following.
Definitely.
Because I think that's the thing, because with volume you can have masses of people following you, but not many people really paying attention to what you do.
Exactly. And also you're creating a body of work. So someone comes in later and they've got a whole rich set of things to look at.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have to first thank you for your generosity.
No, thank
with
you.
Your time
it's been amazing.
And everything that you said, and I think it will be, first of all, useful.
I hope so.
Most definitely. But also, I think it was a jolly conversation. So I hope you also have fun while listening. And where can people find you?
So probably Instagram is the easiest, where I'm Chapple, which is spelled CHAPPLE_cartoons. Annoyed about the underscore, but I didn't catch that when I made it. So yes, you can find me there, and I have linked to my website, but really the website just goes back to the Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, I will put all those the show notes. So, but just for the audio listeners. No, thank you. Truly.
No, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, it's such it's so wonderful to be able to talk to you, and always these conversations just bring so much to your own brain and mind, and
it's so nourishing. It was really, I feel like I had like a 5-course meal.
Well, likewise.
It was all good food, so it was really lovely and very illuminating.
It's been gorgeous.
From an illustrator, we can end with that. It brought some light and some lightness.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you, and come to the podcast again.
Yes, I certainly will.
Hopefully, when your book comes out. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll just put it out there.
Okay. I shall open to that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melanie. I loved every minute of it. Talking to you. Thank you. It's always a joy.
Equally.
Thank you.
Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Bye. Bye.